Next, for today's perspective, we're going to look at the issue of abortion, one of the most controversial, bitterly contested ethical and political battlegrounds, particularly right now in the US. It's an issue that's fueled the Republican presidential debate. In the past few hours, Governor Ron DeSantis arguing the debate with Chris Christie over abortion policy, and DeSantis standing by the policy he signed into law in Florida, banning abortion after a 6-week gestation. Today marks International Day of Safe Abortion, and while rights in the US have declined since the abolition of Roe versus Wade, taking away the constitutional right to the procedure last year, in Mexico, it's been decriminalised in the past 2 years. Now, my guest is Ruth Fletcher, a senior lecturer in medical law at Queen Mary University, who's been working on women's rights for many years. Good to have you on the programme. If we can start, when you've looked at this for many years, what trend do you see with worldwide abortion rights? I mentioned the States getting tougher. What about elsewhere?
Yes, it's interesting because actually the States is pulling the other way, is moving to recriminalising at a moment when in other jurisdictions we're seeing liberalisation. So in Australia, for example, in Ireland, we've seen really significant legalisation and support for women and pregnant people in act. So the picture is very uneven, and that tells us a lot. That tells us ways in which women's bodies, pregnant people's bodies, are at the centre of uneven stigmatisation and criminalisation at the moment. So in the context of that uneven picture, it's really, really important for work like organisations that I chair, the Abortion Support Network, the work that they do in providing non-judgmental support, in providing information, in providing funding, in providing care for everyone across Europe who's trying to access abortion but can't access it at home. Those organisations are key.
Now, you mentioned this mixed picture, and it is interesting because if you look at the situation in in America generally, so you have the US where people years ago from Mexico, Catholic country where it was very hard to get access to abortion, were going into the States. Now, because of decriminalisation in Mexico, people leaving the States going there instead. That's an interesting trend, isn't it?
It is a really interesting trend, and it shows the problems of bordering and ways in which bordering and the barriers for people trying to access abortion, the ways in which they make migrants and undocumented people more vulnerable in particular. So, again, the kind of exclusions that come around through borders are accentuated in the context of trying to access a restricted service like restricted care like abortion. But yeah, absolutely. What we do see though as well is the resilience of people, right? The resilience of people who are seeking out abortion. Typically, restrictions, whether that's criminalisation or whether it's a lack of public funding, they don't stop people accessing abortion. They simply delay it and they make it later and more difficult. So they make it a more troubling experience for people, perhaps. And so that's really important, that criminal law doesn't work.
When we look at, you mentioned the States, you mentioned the mixed picture, I think you have to look at Poland, Nicaragua, Honduras, are some of the countries that have gone the other way. Not many countries, but actually starting to criminalise it more so, going back. Is there a direct correlation between laws restricting abortion and the number of women dying as a result of that from an unsafe abortion?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, of course, laws restricting abortion make it more difficult, and what happens is they make people fearful, and therefore they're more likely not to access the healthcare that they need if they get into trouble. So we do see sometimes then, when there is this very stigmatized, criminalized context, we do see people's health be jeopardized. And so we have seen different instances of that, as you say, in Poland, in Ireland previously, in Mexico, in the States. So it does jeopardize health because it means people don't trust healthcare, and that obviously it can be dangerous across the board, not just in an abortion context.
I wonder, even for you to be talking to me about it, just openly, campaigning for the rights, and what kind of feedback you get afterwards. I mean, you're being targeted. I know in Northern Ireland they're putting up barriers to protect people leaving abortion centres from protesters outside, and that's been going on in the UK as well. So what's that like, even speaking out about this?
That's such an interesting question. I mean, I think one of speaking out about it actually is a very joyful experience because we see so much resilience, so much creativity, so much love and support for people accessing abortion. This idea about giving care in a non-judgmental way, in respecting people's decisions about whether to stay pregnant, whether to go on and parent. So this work it can be difficult, it can be challenging at times, but because it's so committed and because there are so many committed people and we're pushing back against a punitive system and trying to generate a world that cares without judgment, that is very inspiring work.
Can I ask you finally just whether you feel, after all of your years campaigning and what we're seeing, as I mentioned, in the States, in Poland, Nicaragua, and elsewhere, there is this green wave, they call it in Latin America, where it's been decriminalised. Are you more hopeful now than you were a decade ago?
I am actually. It is really amazing to see the huge collectivities of people on the streets, in Parliament, providing care, all these different levels of activity working together to make care available, to change laws, to increase public healthcare provision. So that joining together in huge collectives, Argentina, as you say, has been inspiring that regard. That does make me hopeful. But at the same time, we are also seeing increased stigmatization and increased criminalization. We are seeing pushback against reproductive rights, obviously in Poland, in the United States, as you said. So the picture is very uneven because world economies, world social provision is uneven. And we know that women's bodies, reproductive sexual bodies, become sites of conflict, and we have to push back against that.
Ruth Fletcher, thank you for your time and for being with us, Senior Lecturer in Medical Law at Queen Mary University.